Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Parenting and You with me, Dr. Shefali. I still remember when I first became a mother, I had so many fantasies about how I would be and how my child would be. I had designed every element from the set to the cast to writing the scripts for who would play in her life. And I had literally coordinated it all in my mind. And then when reality came crashing in and my fantasies were not coming true, that's when I would lose my mind the most. It took me a few years to realize that it wasn't my child who was doing anything wrong. It was just that the fantasy I had about her wasn't coming true. It was just that the movie I had created in my mind wasn't working out. She wasn't being the right actor that I wanted her to be. She wasn't following the script. And that's when I went through one of my biggest spiritual epiphanies. And I really think that that's where the birth of conscious parenting began, when I realized that I was more about my fantasy than about who my child really was. That's when I realized, wow, Shefali, you are just missing the mark. You are forgetting to tune into your child's essence because you're so wrapped up in this dream, in this fantasy of perfection. In this episode, you're going to hear two families who are grappling with their own fantasies of perfection. I can't tell you how many adults I've met in my practice who express how their childhoods were riddled with impossible ideals of perfectionism, with these high standards of achievement that they felt they simply couldn't match up to. And these pressures from childhood have now led them as adults to feel a crippling sense of failure, a crippling sense of unworthiness. And that's exactly how my next guest, Ranj, feels. Hi, Ranj. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So tell us briefly what you're struggling with right now.
Well, I have grown up children that I've brought up 21 and 19, and I feel like I could have done better as a mom. I'm not sure their direction, although they look like they know what they're doing. For me, I don't want to see them struggling in life, and they've decided not to go to school or pursue higher education and just get into the workforce. And I feel like they can do so much. I'm really proud of who they are as people. I just feel like they're selling themselves short. And for me, I feel like everything that I touch just doesn't work out.
Hmm. So I hear from you that you're really worried and concerned that your children are not going to be successful.
Yeah, I do. I feel that they're, maybe in a false illusion of what they really need to be doing in life, and that maybe I didn't support them to be able to see what they're capable of. And they have big visions. And I know for me, my big visions have fallen short. And I kind of feel like maybe that's what's going to happen with them.
So you're feeling like it's your fault that they have gone off the traditional path.
That's right. My daughter got into her universities with high honors and scholarships and said, I'm not doing that. And it was very disappointing for me because of what everybody in my family is thinking. She should go to school. Why isn't she going to school? I don't feel like being out in family settings because the question's always, what are they doing? What are they up to? And their kids are all doing what they're supposed to do, and my kids are not.
So it sounds like you come from a family that puts a lot of emphasis on college and getting a degree and checking off the checklist. So talk a little bit about your family because I'm hearing that that pressure feels very real to you.
Yeah, I feel a lot of our extended family has always been in the forefront of our lives, and there's always been this need to exceed and excel by doing better and being the trophy of our family. Like, we achieved and we changed things around. I didn't finish school. I've dabbled in a lot of things. Never really known what I wanted to do. So I was always the troubled child and not ideal and poor ranch. So that poor story of me just keeps following me around. And now it's like when I hear people talk, it's poor Maya and poor Sean.
So you're seeing like a history repeating itself where the narrative you indoctrinated from your childhood was that you were, quote unquote, the troubled one, the poor Ranj, as you say, the poor girl who could never get it right. And now you're so afraid and anxious that your children will suffer the same emotional toil that you did.
That's right. Yeah,
So I see that you are from an Indian background. Is that correct?
that's right. We're Punjabis and my parents are from India.
So what's making you emotional? I see that something struck a chord.
I think it's just as we're talking, that poor me story that I kind of have my kids have inherited. They don't think they are, but everybody looks at us like we are.
Do you think you've lived out and manifested the story of poor Ranj, and in what ways?
Just things never working out, a breakup of a marriage, losing my home, doing work that I don't like. I feel like everything is not meant to work out because,
You're the troubled one.
yeah,
You have to live out that story. And I think that's so common in so many of us when we receive that label in childhood. You know, you're the bad one or the good one or the troubled one, like you did. We almost begin to live that role. We live up to that image that we were bestowed with in childhood. It's like our parents give us a role and a place and a script, and then unconsciously we just begin enacting that role very well, like Oscar level performance. And you've just, according to you, seem to have lived out that role to a T. So let's go back to your childhood. If you could talk about two or three main messages that you remember receiving from your mother, what would those be?
must be perfect, behave, and don't make any mistakes. It was just like complete perfection. So I was always scared of messing up. And I messed up, but there was no room for that. There was no room for mistakes.
And what if you did make a mistake? What happened then?
Abuse, being outcasted, like I'm a problem.
Mm. And messages from your father?
Well, if he was present, um, again, you just be someone who can make the family look good,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Cover up shame. Don't look at what's really there.
Cover it
Make
up.
others look good. Make others feel good.
Yes. So very early on, Ranj received these messages that how she felt, what she thought, who she was not good enough, and she needed to hide behind a disguise of perfectionism and the illusion of being okay, even though perhaps you were crumbling from inside.
Yeah.
So go back to Ranj at the age of 5, 7, 10, 12. What did little Ranj grow up believing about herself?
I didn't think there was fun when I was little, but there was so much drama. And it was always like trying to make everybody happy
Mm,
and ignore the drama. So I had to be, the one that made people smile or the one that made people laugh.
mm,
Like if mom wasn't home, it had to clean everything up or cut all the grass and do whatever. Like my whole life was hers. I needed to make sure that she was happy.
mm. So is it fair to say that you grew up with this sense that you belong to her? You are hers.
Yeah.
Was there a sense that in your childhood you were her object to be used in whatever way she decided, and you were a puppet for her to create into whoever she wanted?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it was understood for me that if I cleaned up everything and I didn't walk on the carpet that was vacuumed, that we had dusted everything and we cleaned everything, everything was in its place, that she could be okay.
So your goal was to make mommy okay?
Yeah,
So say more about that.
it was never enough. Like, I remember cutting the whole lawn as a little girl and hoping mom would come home and that would make her happy. But as soon as she came in, there was something that was missed,
Mm,
something that wasn't done,
mm,
something that I should have done.
mm.
And the whole lawn never got noticed. It was just not done. It wasn't.
When our parents, who we survive on, tell us that they are not happy with us, we don't think to ourselves, oh, mommy is too unreasonable. We don't think to ourselves that, what do we indoctrinate? Oh, I'm not good enough because they must be perfect because they feed me, they clothe me, they bathe me. So that emotional experience now is your reality that you now put out into the world. So you must unconsciously match that reality in your outer world experience. That's what all of us do. I always say we're not living a life, we're living a pattern. And we keep recreating that pattern of the same emotional experience. And I want listeners to observe their own life patterns and how they are creating the same emotional experience over and over again. So now you are right now in the present moment. Ranj, right now, you are with your children, you are with your job, and you are with yourself. And yet again, even though your children appear okay and they seem happy, you are recreating for yourself that same emotional experience that you have failed, that you are not good enough, that you are unworthy. Do you see how you're doing that again?
It's hard to see if I'm creating it or like, where do I catch up to this? I see it. And then it's like, where's the turnaround point? At what point? Like, do I need to start thinking different? I know that. Like, I'm not getting it.
I understand. What you're really trying to ask is when will you get a break so that things can be so amazing on the outside, so finally you feel good enough? Like, for example, if your daughter, if only she had accepted those scholarships, gone to a good university, and done well, you feel that, finally, see, now I got a little bit of those crumbs that I can grow into a cake, and I can eat that cake of worthiness. I can eat the cake of self worth, right? So you're waiting for something good on the outside so that then you can go, but here's the real truth about self growth. It doesn't start on the outside. You have to find the beauty because you see the beauty truly. It's not like, what you're waiting for is that perfect life. In some aspect, I know you're not unrealistic, but something on the outside, the raise, the boss telling you you're amazing, the medal, the prize, the star, you're still waiting like you did as a child for that positive reward. And because your entire childhood was dependent on your mommy loving you, on your mommy praising you, on her validation. So you're still looking for that outside validation. But here's the thing, you have to begin giving it to yourself. You have to begin to see the fruits of your parenting, of your mothering. You have to see the beauty in your own self so that you can look at your son and your daughter and go, I see the spark of your abundance. I see the joy in your step, in your purpose. I understand you. That's what they are waiting for now, you see? And now you are continuing the same pattern like your parents did with you. You are rejecting them and their life choices in the same way, though not to the same degree, that your parents did to you. You see, your children are probably okay. And what you're saying is that no, your conditioning says that they need to have to go to college to get a degree and earn a lot of money and look really good on the outside, and then it won't be forced. So your conditioning now is battling with you. But you see what you're doing? You're doing the same thing in a way that your parents did because you didn't fit their ideal, their match for their expectations. Now your children are not living your ideal, the match of your expectation. You, in your own way, are refusing to see their essence, and you're only caught up with their external, and you are rejecting them as well. Now, here's what I want to show you. It's the same voice that you hear when you look at your daughter, isn't it? It just changes to she is going to ruin everything. She is not going to be good enough. She is not perfect. She is a failure.
That makes sense as to why she gets rageful. She'll tell me something she's really excited about, and I will ask a question, or maybe it's already the damage has been done. So now that's where she hears me from.
Yes.
She doesn't want to share what she's doing because she feels negative feedback from me.
Yes. So do you see your own negative feedback to yourself is the voice that is ruling your mind, that is running the ship, that is in charge of your vibration, so to speak, your energy. And that's what you put out into the world. And that's how you color your experience with your children. That voice is the voice that is ruining the connection between yourself and your child because you're not seeing your child's essence. You're just running that tape. Oh my goodness, she's not good enough. She's going to be like me. She's going to ruin her existence. She's not going to graduate from college. What will people say? Talk more, say more. What did you get?
I'm reflecting that back to her.
Yes.
If I could see that everything's okay and that I am good enough and that am I am capable, I can do, then I could see that in her too.
Yes. So, do you see? And I want all listeners to really realize this that our relationship with ourself is our relationship with others. No matter what you did, your mother talked to you with criticism, with degradation.
Yeah, that's what my daughter thinks I do too.
Yes. But now you have this beautiful opportunity as a parent through your relationship with your children to give it to yourself. So thank you so much, Ranj, for joining us and for being vulnerable and sharing your struggles.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Shefali.
As you heard through Ranj's story, when our childhood is plagued by the imposition of perfection, by unrealistic standards of achievement and success, where the child feels puppeteered and controlled by their parents, that child grows up into an adult who simply cannot hear their own truth, who is disconnected from their own inner power, who is disembodied from their own sense of authority, governance, wisdom, and capacity. And that's what you heard in Ranj's story, an adult who simply feels unable, unworthy to be whole. And that's why I tell parents, watch how you relate to your children. Because if you relate to them with endless criticism, with constant standards that they have to achieve, they actually, on the contrary, often grow up with a debilitating sense of worth instead of the I can mentality, as you saw with Ranj. So, our inner relationship with ourselves, if it is riddled with shame, with doubt, with unworthiness, then that's what we project onto our children. And then they carry that legacy into adulthood and into their families. Up next, we're going to meet a mother who has a 21-year-old daughter. So she's been there, done that. But now she wants to explore becoming a mother again. But she is riddled with doubt and insecurity. The decision to become a parent is never an easy one. And many times parents want to know what they can do to best prepare themselves. Feather and Galia are two guests of mine who are joining me now to talk about their relationship and their decision to embark on a journey of motherhood together. Welcome, Feather and Galia. Let's begin with you, Feather. Tell us what you're struggling with right now.
Galia and I have been in a long distance relationship for 3 years. And she made it very clear from the beginning of our relationship that she wanted to be a mother. And I was pretty clear that I didn't want to do it all over again. I have a 21-year-old daughter, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And partly because the relationship I was in at the time with her father was really unhealthy, and partly because I was young and I had no clue what I was doing. So love has moved mountains, and I am very open and in as far as the idea to be a co-parent with Galia. But it has brought up all these concerns around my own capacity to show up in a healthy way and heal those inner parts of myself that would project or that were wounded and really unable to hold the space and have the patience that motherhood requires. There is one other piece here that complicates potentially things a bit, and that is that Galia would like to have this child the old-fashioned way with a baby daddy, father who is in the child's life. And I know that that piece is going to be interesting to navigate in addition to just the complicated nature of parenting.
Okay, thank you for explaining. So, Galia, why don't you share a little bit about your vision for becoming a mother? And this is your first time. So, tell us about what your fantasy about this is.
Yeah. In my ideal dream world, I have a father who is available to hold that role and that position in the child's life. And from the very beginning, when Feather wasn't initially on board, I asked, well, what seat do you want at the table? Because I believe that this child's going to need a lot of seats at this table of people who are ready and willing to show up in a good way. And at first it was auntie kind of vibes, and okay, you'll be auntie. And then I noticed in myself the hyper independent piece that was like, then just me, then I got it. It'll just be me. And then when the child says, who's my dad? I'll just point over there and that'll be that. And now in my ideal dream world, there is the co-parenting conversation between all three of us and an agreement of how we wish to show up for this being that is choosing all of us as well to be on their team. And dad is present. Dad is making the effort, is bonding in those formative years. And they have a bond that is filled with trust and vulnerability and presence. And Feather and I are also co-parenting in our own maternal ways and finding that happy harmony somehow between three adults and this maybe twins, maybe one child. We don't know what the goddess has in store, but we'll see how it all kind of unfolds as it comes.
Okay, so couple questions. So, y'all are living long distance in different cities, different countries?
We've been in different cities, and I'm actually bridging that gap. As it would be, I travel a lot, and I recently, on my travels at an airport, found a puppy. And this puppy is now part of my life. And so, as part of, I feel like the pre training to a baby we've decided to cohabitate in the next upcoming months. And I'm going to make the shift into Colorado where Feather is located. And we're going to do a little bit of a test run, it seems, with this puppy and show up in a co-parenting style.
So y'all have never lived together until now?
We've never lived together. No.
Okay. So that's a really important piece to just mark because, this is our tendency, right? We want that vision, we want that fantasy of having this child with all these players. But the reality is, we haven't really taken that first step to even test if we can live together. So I'm pretty certain it will go beautifully, but it's just important to not, sometimes we jump so far ahead. And I hear in you, Galia, this decision, and you're very clear that you're going to do this no matter what. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So you've already made up your mind, whether there's one person or 10, you're going to have this child, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, understand. So, Feather, you said that you have some reservations about there being the presence of this quote unquote male figure. So, talk about that. Why is that something that is bringing up this hesitancy in you?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it a hesitancy as much as a consideration, an additional potential complexity added. Fortunately, I don't mind complexity. I really enjoy it. But an awareness that that piece is, not wearing rose-colored glasses about it. It's challenging as it is to parent with two and with three or, more. It can, at the same time, it can add benefits of that support system, can also add challenges. And I think for a question I have, Dr. Shefali, is how important do you think it is for harmony in the household for there to be a shared vision or agreement on how to parent? Do you think that there can be different parenting styles and that's a benefit for the child? Do you think the parents really need to get on the same page or it's going to be a disaster?
Well, it's not so extremely either or, but I hear what you're saying and you've had experience. So you know that when the partners are not getting along, when they're full of conflict, when they are antagonistic toward each other, that creates so much stress in the parenting journey. And you also know that raising a child is so unexpected with so many wild turns and you can't really predict it. So I hear you. You're a seasoned parent who is trying to minimize all the X factors. And here you have Galia, who's younger, who's like, oh, why not? Let's have a whole table of people and a puppy. And we remember that, right? We more seasoned mothers remember that kind of utopic idealism that we had, which quickly crashes and crumbles and burns. So I get it. I get where you both are. It's not so much that Feather, you are reserved in terms of not wanting a child. You just are more realistic. And Galia, you're allowed to have your idealism. You're allowed to have that bubble of rosy, hued glasses where everything is going to be beautiful and things are going to be so amazing. We want you to preserve that. However, I think it's important that you hear Feather's vast life experience of 21 years and hear how difficult it can be and go into this journey prepared. And you can't fully prepare because you've never met the child yet. And guess what? All parents know this. We change once we become parents. Like who you are loving right now is not the same person because we evolve or devolve once we become parents. So y'all have never seen each other as parents of this child. You've seen Feather as a parent of that child, but you haven't seen her as the parent of your child, Kalia. It is completely a different human that shows up. So, parents often think before, becoming parents that, oh, this is going to bond us. This is going to make us closer. Many times it does. And many times it is the very thing that splinters them apart. So to answer your question, is it ideal to have the same parenting philosophy? And is it ideal to both of you being conscious parents? Yes, of course, that's a no brainer. However, to expect that is very naive because each of you is coming to the equation with such different baggage, which you don't even know that you have until it shows up. And Feather, you know, right? You saw yourself morph into this other being, this otherworldly human that you had no idea existed inside you. And Galia, you are right now, the Galia you know is the one you think is going to be there as a mother. But you are going to face the death of this Galia and the birth of a whole new human being. And that's the beauty of motherhood. So let me ask you, Galia, do you have reservations? And what are your questions?
I think the biggest concern is the meshing of worlds. You know, Feather and I having this foundation as I'm calling in a father for my child and feeling my internal capacity of, okay, there's my relationship with Feather, and now there's a relationship with another being, and then there's a child. How am I going to bandwidth all of the complexity that will involve and have the patience and the loving kindness and the ability to speak what I need to each person effectively while also holding myself in a massive life transition and an ego death and
Yes.
so where I assume it's possible because some people are doing it and there's a fear story of I'm going to be like pulled into too many, stretched too thin, and then I'm going to lose all of it.
Yes, yes. So that's completely understandable and so legitimate to have. I think, I would give you this piece of insight and a suggestion that be careful as you construct this movie. You're calling in this father, you're bringing in this child. This is not a fantasy you're getting to weave. This is not a completion of an inner longing that you have for yourself. This is a massive tsunami, tornado, hurricane, a whole life that you're asking to participate in that you have zero control over. I think when parents sometimes carefully craft and design it, we're going to do this first, we're going to do the puppy, then the plans, we're choosing the father, we're choosing the moment, it may lend itself to this feeling, this delusion of omnipotence that is going to crash and burn because we are not in control of how this looks. We are not in control of how people show up. We're not going to be able to demand that each of the other players show up in the way that you envisioned or that is even best for the child. So basically, it's a shit show about to happen. And if you're ready for the wreckage, then you're actually the most prepared. When you're floating on cloud nine thinking, oh my goodness, we're going to have stained glass windows and the sun is going to peek through every morning and we're going to play in the sandpit and make castles, that's when you're actually setting yourself up for the greatest failure. When you instead say, you know what? We're both going to screw it up, or we're both going to want to kill each other. We're both, or the three of us are going to be absolute, imperfect human beings in deep folly and, huge shadow and ego and personas. And we're going to have to really figure this out together. Now you're better prepared versus how is this all going to match the fantasy? You see the difference?
Totally.
And Galia, maybe for you to take some of Feather's, real life experience in. And when she says, bringing in this third person does add complexity, she's right. But some of it does ask for caution and a little bit of slowing down and making sure you're making the right decision to the best degree of our consciousness. I often tell parents who look back in retrospect with guilt or shame that we did the best we could, right? Feather, you did the best you could with the level of consciousness you had. And of course, you want to go back and turn back time. And maybe, Feather, your daughter will say to you, wow, look what an amazing mother you are now, right? But you're going to,
Oh,
but here's how you can transform that and alchemize that. You can tell her, it's because you were my teacher,
oh,
right?
oh,
Right. She was your teacher to allow you to be this person today. So you can alchemize her potential comparison that, oh, you're so nice to this baby and you were such a witch to me. You're like, yeah, I didn't know any better, but look what a beautiful teacher I had. So
oh.
you both sound so ready, I think, as ready as you can be. And I think you have a beautiful balance of jaded cynicism and realism and this naive, endearing enthusiasm. I think that's perfect. There is no united front either. Don't expect each other to be unanimous on every decision. It's okay to have a healthy back and forth. But I think you'll are both coming from the right place of wanting this to be a journey of discovery and evolution. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much, doctor. Thank you so much.
So I'm pretty sure that in both these stories, you could hear how we as parents get so fixated on the movies in our fantasies. So I write in my book that children who grow up being forced into their parents' movies feel forever misplaced, misunderstood, and claustrophobic. They want to scream, "Hey, I just want to live my own life. Get me out of your movie." But they cannot do so because their roles have been cast from infancy and continue throughout their lives. So I want you listening to understand that our lives, especially with our children, are not a fantasy. Life calls us to live it not in our fantasies, not in how tomorrow will turn out, but right here, right now, in the present moment. If you received insights and wisdom from this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with those you love. And I will see you next time on Parenting and You with me, Dr. Shefali. Parenting and You with Dr. Shefali is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional medical, psychological, psychotherapeutic, coaching, healthcare, or other qualified professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment.